Awesome. It's great to be here, everybody. I always love talking to folks as they're embarking in this journey, and I really love Chicago Booth's application. Full disclosure, I'm not an alum of Booth, but that doesn't mean I can't still love the school. I went to MIT Sloan, but I really like Booth's sort of, I don't know, it's a great mix of this sort of culture of discipline and intellect, and yet creativity on the other side. It's like this kind of yin yang of analytics, but then creativity. You've got, a curriculum that you can really design to make work with you, but yet they really focus on building a foundation of leadership. And you'll see those aspects in the application, which personally make it a really, really fun application to coach applicants on, because you've got this really practical side of the application where you talk about your career goals, and you've got this really open-ended, exploratory, more personal essay in nature as well, which goes back to that creative side. So we're going to spend some time digging into the online app. If you see me looking over here, just so you guys know, that's where I've got my other monitor and I'm actually in the application. So that's why I'll be looking away from the camera from time to time. So I'm not going to go line by line on these things. I'm going to have full faith that you can fill out your name and things like that when you're actually applying. And you'll see, for the most part, this application is empty because I want to just have the focus on really the strategy, less about what you're going to see me type. So first and foremost, if you have not created your online applications for the schools, do so. I think there's this tendency, you want to have everything right before you wander online and actually set up that application. Don't. Go ahead and start doing that today. The more that you can familiarize yourself with the online application, the better prepared you are going to be when you start filling it out. And also making sure this gives you ample time to strategically respond to the online application and get any other ducks in a row that you need to. So if they're asking for official transcripts, which they're typically not, but if they are, that gives you the time to get it. Do you need to chase something down from the GMAT GRE? So just across the board, Booth included, but I would say this for all schools, make sure you go ahead and sign up for that, start that online application sooner rather than later, just so that you're going in fully aware of what they're asking. So you can see that Chicago Booth the application is designed into a number of sections, which makes it super good and clear and gives you considerable time, again, to explore it. So I'm not really going to spend a lot of time here, but, they're going to ask you things like, okay, what program are you going for and whatnot. The only thing I would say is if you start one, if you have the opportunity, if you shift from a round 1 to a round 2, don't worry about it. Even if in the system you first indicated that's round 1, you can change that or start a new app. So it's not a big deal if you are aiming for round 1 and then for whatever reason life gets in the way and you need to punt until round 2. Don't worry about that. So again, just my advice to you is get started on this sooner rather than later. So some of this stuff here, this is the biographical. In this, I am good old Jean Myers. I don't know why. That's just the names that came to my mind as I was filling this out. And there's the only thing I want to call out here is sometimes I get a question like, oh, well, does my citizenship matter? Or, is there one that's better than another is that going to hurt me in some way? Especially if some people have dual nationalities. You're going to hear me say this a few times in this walkthrough, but there is really no way to game the system. Okay. You can worry about if I have, and most of you, I'm assuming, do not have dual nationalities, but for those of you who do, this is relevant, but there's other questions in here as well. If you jump over, I think it is, let's see, in the personal history where they ask you for your gender identity, how you identify yourself. Again, there are no ways to game the system here. Or if I put, I would prefer not to say, is that bad? If I say this, is that bad or is that good? If there are it's just not important. So what's much more important is to really answer as you want to. But don't try to get game theory it, because you're not going to win. It's impossible to know in any given moment how the application class is sizing up. And these are never going to be the factors of where the data lies specifically that's going to shift the caliber of your candidacy. So just don't even worry about stuff like that. Focus on like, what is the answer that is true to you, what makes sense for you, what you feel good about. Enter that and be done with it. We do get a few questions about this thing, and I understand you want to leave nothing to chance, but this is nothing you do here is really going to determine the outcome. This is just pure stats collection, so try not to overthink it. So go ahead and make sure you're filling out all this. I do want to call out, this is on the personal history page. There is a question, is there anything about your upbringing or family household circumstances that you would like the admissions committee to know? This also happens to be right after, are you a first-gen college student? Which is important for these schools. They always want to be making sure that, that they're just bringing as many applicants into the fold as possible. But so is there anything about your upbringing or family household circumstances that you would like the admissions committee to know? I would encourage you guys to think about what that answer might be for you. A lot of the schools have a similar question to this on their online application, or even as a short essay response these days. So this is Booth's version, but MIT Sloan has one. Harvard, in its short answers, has a question that's similar. Stanford has a question that's similar. You might think, I don't know, there's nothing special about my upbringing or my family household circumstances. It might be totally in your world because you grew up in it. Of course, it's normal. But if that helps add some color to who you are, how you got to be you, there's no harm in entering it. And the kinds of responses that you might think about it here are your family unit, are your parents together? Did you move around a lot as a kid? Or, just something, if there were no things that might be considered different, which of course everybody is unique, think about if there's anything that's really important to communicate about your culture or even your upbringing, that the schools might just have a better sense of who you are. So personally, I would say to go ahead and use this. Don't plop another essay in there, but give them an idea of your upbringing, who you came from and where you came from. Again, this is kind of the Chicago Booth and you. The only thing I want to, again, you know what I'm going to say. You can't game theory this. So don't worry, like, should I put entrepreneurship or finance? Is that going to change the answer? No. What it does need to make sure is that it's consistent with your career goals. But beyond that, go for what you want to go for, and don't worry about it. Don't worry about how are they going to perceive it. They're just trying to understand your goals and what you want to work on while you're at Booth. And then the only other thing I would say here is, like, as to me, what this page really signifies is you want to start doing your homework. If you have a good sense of what you want to study, great. But you also, when it comes to those essays, you're going to want to identify explicitly those resources that Booth offers. So the only thing that, yes, you've got to fill this out, but I also just think it's a reminder to go do your research so that you can answer these questions with confidence. I'm going to skip to the, the academics. Again, the thing here is, the tip here I get is often around these open-ended responses on academic honors, awards, and other recognitions that you've received. And my tip here is to think expansively. I mean, use good judgment always, but obviously obvious contenders are, something like your, whether or not you graduated with honors, whether or not you made Dean's List, whether or not, like, if you know your class ranking, that could go here. But you could also think about those, sometimes it could be if you were chosen to be a teaching assistant or awarded a really exciting research assistant role, or if you were selected for a project to work with the dean to rethink the curriculum. Any of these things could be on here, or if not here, there are some other spots that you could put it as well. But again, as a rule, what we do at Gatehouse with our clients is we actually send them a Word document of all the, I call, strategic questions that are included in an online application, so that we as their coach can review them and really dig into it. And so my advice to all of you is like, definitely go into each of these box questions and think about like, okay, don't leave them blank. Make sure that, or at least make it a conscious choice if you have to leave it blank or choosing to leave it blank. But don't assume that you can't be super strategic with these kinds of open-ended questions. So make sure you take advantage of your the open text boxes in each of the different sections. And then the only other thing I would say is like, we get a ton of questions of like, okay, well, I did 1 year abroad. I studied in a different country, but it's not reflected on my transcript. Do I need to upload it? And my answer always is like, I don't know, because everybody has a very specific situation. Oh, well, some of my grades transfer, but not all, but that's because it was pass fail. And how should I do that? Again, some of this, one thing you want to do is make sure that you've read the instructions very closely. So you can see on the screen, Booth is trying to give you as much information about what transcripts and what information it needs to get from you. But for many of you, you'll still be like, but I have this oddball situation. I'm not sure how to handle it. What I always tell people in this case is pick up the phone or send an email and ask Booth. They're trying to create a system that works for most people, but don't worry if it doesn't work for you. Just pick up the phone and call them. They want you, they are hopeful that this application and their guidance is easy to follow, but they recognize that it's going to work for 80% of the people, and for 20% of the people, they're going to have these kind of interesting situations. Just pick up the phone and call, but do make sure you've read all the guidance that they have. I do think like one of the shifts that they've made in recent years is, you can see the very first bullet, upload an unofficial scanned copy. People sometimes freak out about this. It needs to be official. Oh my gosh. And the schools are really trying to, their whole goal in this is making it easier and easier for you to actually go ahead and hit submit on an application. It's a win for them. They have another awesome applicant to review. And then it's also a win for you. Okay. And then I'm just going to highlight two more, or like a few more areas that you want to make sure that you take advantage of. And this is also like in the employment area. So let's just say if you can add all this detail about where you worked and what you did. So again, you would say, I actually worked at Bain & Company back in the day. So I would add Bain & Co. because actually I did that right after business school, but whatever. And you would add the details. Again, you're going to have questions. Well, should I put my annualized comp, or maybe there was a fluke 1 year? What you want to do is not, again, get tripped up as like all, like everything, like, is it, you don't want to get tripped up on these little particulars that are not going to change the decision in who you are and your candidacy. You want to show judgment, make an executive decision that feels honest and is defensible, and be done with it. And if you really got something that you're like, this is kind of confusing, use the optional essay. Just add a very quick statement. In comp, I reflected my ending compensation is reflecting only 6 months because I left earlier than the program ended. Okay, good. All you're doing is like, so rather than making something huge that's not going to change the answer on your candidacy, you're just giving them a little bit more information. So they're like, okay, got it. That's all that process is. However, the other thing I would say is, remember in these, you got a box here. So make sure you take care of these boxes. So you have 700 characters, which is about 2 to 3 sentences. If you're writing sentences, you can also just do it a little bit more of like a resume style here with using some semicolons. But take advantage of these job descriptions. And what's important here, you want to strike the balance. Like, so if I wrote like, So I was at Bain & Company, consultant, helped clients solve problems. I can't type while talking. Help big clients solve big problems. Okay, that's terrible, number one. But also, any consultant could write that, right? So even at these, with these open boxes, think about, well, did you specialize in an industry? Or, rather than use vague words, clients, problems, clients isn't that vague, but like stuff that doesn't make sense, help the reader see your job. Specialized in education and healthcare clients, helping them develop go-to-market strategies and cost-benefit analysis. I don't know, whatever. But like bring some life and own what you did a little bit more so that you don't look like exactly every other applicant from your industry and job function. Okay. So I think that's it for that. Reason for leaving. It's totally, I think the idea here, what I generally advise is this concept of like upward trajectory. And what I mean by that is now this only works if, like, obviously this is why you left. It's like you were eager to do something else. Don't poo-poo where you came from. You're like, oh, it was stale. I wasn't learning anything more. I didn't like this. No, it's much more like I gained skills and then wanted to go do X with those skills. Okay. So all of these things, there's a lot of strategy to filling these out. All right. So somehow I want to now, let's see. Actually, I just realized we have, I looked at the time and was off on the time and realized we have more time than I thought, which is awesome because we have a lot to cover off here on the essays. All right. Let me see. Okay. So I want to just talk a little bit about activities. So actually two things here. Number one, please list and describe your current and past involvement in extracurricular activities. So some schools are pretty focused, like give up, I think Columbia is like, Columbia I think has like give up to 3 post-grad, give up to 3 in college. Some like HBS only allows room for 3, and they say basically post-collegiate, but a lot of times it's collegiate as well. So, but Booth doesn't say anything, which is great. It gives you lots of opportunities to think about how you want to use the space to tell them about the things you're involved in. Now, so they ask some specifics. Again, sometimes people are like, are they going to be, if I only do it, I don't know, whatever, 16 hours a year, maybe even 10, should I put it? Or like, are they going to think that's bad? They don't really have time to figure all this out. Like they're not going to be like trying to figure out like, okay, or if you put, don't put too many numbers in here that make it sound unbelievable. They recognize you have a job. They recognize you have a life. And you get no points for quantity. It's all about quality. So don't overthink, like just do the math. Again, make sure it's defensible. Make sure like you can kind of just stand by, even if it's just back of the envelope, but you can stand behind whatever number you give here. But really, the things I want to point out here are the box, again, that's what I keep saying, but also even the organization name. Like obviously, if you're doing Minds Matter, if you're a big brother, the organization name is pretty clear, right? But maybe you are just, you have really connected with fitness over the past 10 years. It's a big part of your life. And maybe, but there's like no organization you're really part of. I mean, you're part of some, but not really, like you run with some friends, like whatever. But you could still use this, right? You could say general fitness, participant or something like that. And then in this description and reason, description of and reason for participation, you've got more room here to explain it. Like struggled with weight and health in teens and in teen years, and then, through a friend started running, have since done 2 marathons and recently joined a charity team for a 2-person relay in Pennsylvania, whatever. So my point is, A, you should absolutely have some activities to fill these things out on. But B, like, even if you're like, well, I haven't done anything organized, is that still official? Well, it's up to you whether or not if you want to share the school, but that's a new side. That's a different side of an applicant. And so just because there might not be a formal thing about it, maybe you're just a lot of our clients do a lot of ad hoc mentoring, right? They just have built mentoring into their lives, maybe through some organizations, maybe just people who cold call them on LinkedIn. And they, so they might have developed these mentee relationships with 12 different mentees. Again, there's no organization, you could still mention it. So I would also say, think about college and think about post-college. In general, I wouldn't worry about the pre-college years, the high school years, unless it's like super important to you. And it really makes us better understand who you are at your core. So maybe you rode horses for 12 years of your life. Okay, fine. Don't put it as one of the first ones. Only do it if you have room. I think you only have room for 5 on Booth, 5 activities. So maybe it hits the mark, maybe it doesn't. But really, I'd say try to focus on more recent extracurricular activities. And if you don't have any, like, this is the other question I got. It's like, I don't have any. What should I do? I'm like, well, there's not really much you can do. You should have started doing things a few years ago. But I do encourage you to think expansively, because you might have some things that you're doing that you're not thinking of because you're falling into that trap of it needs to be formal or I need a leadership position. Okay. Okay. So I think those are the big things I wanted to talk about before we jump into the good stuff, which is really the essays. So we'll spend some time on this and definitely come up with more questions as you have them. But there are 2 core essays. And this goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning of this session, is that one of the reasons I just really love Booth because of this practical, tactical side, and then the more like exploratory side. So the first question is, how will the Booth MBA help you achieve your immediate and long-term post-MBA career goals? And there's a 250-word minimum. I guess I like Booth for that reason too. They don't want to be normal. They don't want to be like everybody else where they have a word limit. They actually have what you can't go over. They're like, we don't care what length it is. You just can't go under. So in some ways that's great. In some ways that causes angst for applicants, which I can totally appreciate. So I want to dive into this this essay, which this is a good old like goal statement essay. And if you've ever heard me chat about a goal statement essay, I often think of it as an equation. And some of the elements are in Booth's prompt, but one variable, I guess it's a variable. Some of the variables are in the prompt, but one variable isn't. And the equation that you need to really build out in this application is sort of this idea of the past plus the Booth MBA is the thing that equals the future. And the future, of course, is comprised of my short term flowing into my long term. Now, so this is what you have to do in this essay. You have to address each of these variables to make the equation work. And I'm intentional about using language, equation or argument, because that is what you're doing. You're showing a very clear argument for why how Booth fits into the bigger picture. Now, I mentioned you can see 2 of those variables in the prompt itself, right? The Booth MBA, that's that second variable. And then you've got the immediate and long-term post-MBA career goals. That's on the other side of the equation. Even though Booth does not ask for your past, in order to make this logical argument work, you have to address it. So you have to cover off on these 3 different components when responding to this essay prompt. As a rule of thumb, in terms of that length, look, most schools out there, the goal statement essay is somewhere around 350 to 500 words. I think you can feel totally fine going up to 600 words for Booth, or somewhere in that range of 350 to 600. Yes, that's a wide gap, but you have some space. They've said in the past you're totally fine with using it. The last thing I would say in this essay is do the research. You cannot answer why Booth in loose terms. Like, really think about the way I always think about that is like, here's my goal. Maybe your goal is to break into management consulting, right? And you're an engineer. You really want to think through what resources, whether it's the lead class, whether it's some of the labs that Booth has, what are the experiences that you need to take advantage of at Booth to reach those goals? Okay. We have tons of resources on goal statement essays. Definitely visit our website. We have a workshop that I did actually a few years ago for GMAT Club on the goal statement essay that can be super helpful in constructing this. And by the way, this is an essay that you can use the elements of minus the research for a lot of the different schools. So that's super nice. The second one is a tougher essay, but they're both tough. They're just tough for different reasons. An MBA is as much about personal growth as it is about professional development. In addition to sharing your experiences and goals in terms of career, we'd like to learn more about you outside of work. Use this opportunity to tell us something about who you are. Again, that tricky old 250 word minimum. This essay is harder because you got to do some deep reflection and soul searching. But you do have an opportunity to show what drives you outside of the office. What you talk about can be a very specific extracurricular activity or community-based, or it can be just more of a constant, true north side of you, and a drive and ways that drive to coaching others has manifested itself. This one's going to feel a little bit more reflective in nature. It's probably going to be more of a narrative, telling them a story, bringing us into your life. And I think it can be a really inspiring essay because it just it shows the humanity of who you are as opposed to the sort of the practical side of Booth, that first essay. Word length, again, anywhere between 400, I've seen pretty long essays. But remember, this whole thing is a test in strategic communication. You don't want to get them bored and make them read more and more and more and more. Nobody wants to. So, just know that with every additional word, you're making them read more. So that's it on the essays. I think I'm going to open it up for questions in a second. The only thing I wanted to add, I keep doing that. Sorry, guys. Sorry, hold on. Let me go back. I did this before where I keep hitting the screen instead of my monitor over here. Hopefully you guys can still see. Yeah, test scores. You think I figured this out. This is the additional information. You've got 300 words, more space, right? This is the only time I don't want you to unnecessarily use a text box. So you've got 300 words. Is there any unclear information in your application that needs further explanation or additional details you would like to share with the admissions committee? Please, if so, please use this section. Most people will not have anything in here. Okay, let me say that again. Most people should not have anything in here. Should might be a little bit aggressive, but lots of people will not, and that's totally fine. What you should use this for is just what the prompt says. Is there anything unclear or something that needs additional detail, then use it. If there's any red flags, if your test score isn't where it needs to be, if there was a confusing thing about your comp, this is oh, okay, got it. That's all this is. This is not an additional essay. This is not, a whole new side of you. No, it's just making sure that you've if there's anything that might cause confusion, you're addressing it here. Or if there's just any red flags you want to get in front of, this is another place for it. So I'm going to pause there, hoping that there are some questions. Do we have some questions, Ange?
Oh, yeah. We
Awesome.
have lots of questions. Is the deadline for recommendations same as applications if the university sends my recommenders the link for them to submit the recommendation?
So the link goes out when you enter your recommender's name and email address in the online form. But So number one, tell your recommenders, give them a fake date. Tell them you want it in early. Trust me, just do it. A week early, fine. Tell them that's when you're submitting and that's when you want them to submit, because you don't want to be stuck without a recommendation. However, yes, the schools generally give a little bit of wiggle room to recommendations that come in late, but don't rely on it, because when that window closes, then you're kind of, stuck. So definitely give your recommenders a fake deadline and manage them to it so that you're not stuck without a recommendation.
Thank you. And just do one more question. Does submitting your application on the exact deadline date affect your chances?
No, not at all. And I can say that with all the schools these days. Nope, doesn't matter. But, you want to avoid the stress, but otherwise it does not matter. That's why there's rounds. They close it all up at once. So don't worry about that, but make sure you get it on time.
Okay, thank you. Does AdCom validate our annual compensation numbers with the employer?
Yes, they do. They do not at the time of admission, but they do. Sorry, they do not when they're evaluating your applications. They don't. But if you are accepted in the process, then there will be a full background check. They outsource it to a third-party vendor, and that third-party vendor will have. I think how it works is you will effectively give, in this case, Booth, permission to delve deeper and to capture and to gather that information via this third-party background checker. So it is important to be as honest as possible. But again, going back to that judgment call, sometimes people are like, I don't even remember what my bonus was all those years ago. Meanwhile, I'm like, how can you not remember what your bonus was? I kind of still remember, like, from 20 years ago what my bonus was that given year. But I'm like, okay, but and they can't find the records of it either. Okay, make a very good educated guess, see what you can do. But we've had lots of clients who have, lots might be an exaggeration, several clients who have gotten accepted. And then months later, out of the blue, we get a kind of panicked email like, uh-oh, background check, I was off by my bonus by $5,000. They're all like upset. I'm like, look, it's okay to make an honest mistake. Just clarify it. You'll be fine. And they're fine. So you want to be honest. You don't want to try to deceive them, because you will get caught. But honest mistakes are also okay too.
Thank you. In the work experience description field, should we share in bullets or paragraph format? Also, should this box really differ from our resume?
So again, so this is, you've got 700 characters. I probably say like short, brief sentences. Like you're not going to have enough room to write like profound paragraphs. But I personally would prefer, I think you could, honestly, the answer is you could do either. I don't think there's a right or wrong. And I think the schools are going to be fine. I think it's much more about the content. I feel like bullets sort of give people an out to be a little less, like a little less creative sometimes. So, and back to your second question, should it really differ from your resume? It's not that it should differ. We should know it was the same role, but I don't want you to do a direct cut and paste either. Okay. So, one of my peers, Brooke, she spent like, I think 13 years at Harvard interviewing at HBS Harvard, interviewing and reading applications. And what she's always said to me that stuck with me is the admissions team uses questions like these. I'm pointing over. Sorry, I just realized you guys can't see the screen. Sorry about that. Which is fine. All I did on the thing is like blow up that box again. There you go. Sorry. So my peer has said she uses boxes like those, the responses. The AdCom uses it as a way to make sure that their information on the world around them is relevant. They are working in admissions. They don't know the world you're in. So they actually love learning about what someone does through these responses. So I would say don't do a direct cut and paste. I kind of prefer sentences, but you can drop the I, like that, like I did this, or as this role, I did that. Like there's a lot of excess words. Focus on what you did. but like use this opportunity to think a little creatively and not just cut and paste, and teach the AdCom something about your job, your responsibilities, what you've achieved in that role.
And I think that's all we can take today. Thank you, Liza, so much for the presentation and the answers.
Yeah.
And I'll let you finish up.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. This is great, Ash.
All right. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.